How dare you?
Good evening and welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. Tonight's discussion is a little different from the others, and there'll probably be a few videos on it if you're interested. Leave comments if you're bored with it, or if you'd like to hear more of it, regarding a situation I went through over 30 years ago. It had to do with being admitted involuntarily to a psychiatric hospital, and it includes a lot of narcissistic type behavior, among other things. The purpose, though, is not to diagnose and cure anything, not to provide a solution if you're a teen. It's just simply an observation, and that's the key word, which will come into play in a moment. So to understand the story, you'll have to understand who I was at the time. I'll start off by stating, typically when somebody's sent to a psychiatric hospital, it's because they've done something, like they've robbed a liquor store, or beaten up someone in the family, done something horrific, or been on a bunch of drugs and passed out, or any number of things. For this situation, none of that happened. In fact, it was a surprise and a mystery as far as why I would find myself in such a situation. Let's paint a picture of the time period. It was the 80s, and I was a young drummer, musician, music-loving person who was into a lot of the bands that were called alternative back in those days, but now are just pretty much mainstream, it seems, like The Cure, Missing Persons, Book of Love. Even NXS was seen as kind of underground at first. That was one in my playlists. The Cult, The Human League, Duran Duran, Blondie, all sorts of different bands. I was under the influence of performers, beauty. I'd tried to look like them. I'd grow big hair and have crimping irons, and I'd use hair color, and I'd even put makeup on, like black raccoon eyes. Never outgrew that. And all kinds of creative type outfits I would design or put together and wear in public because I felt a strong affiliation with the music. In my suburban type neighborhood, that wasn't very common. But there were a few of us. But it was full of mainly feathered-haired people who were striving to look like each other, and me and my little group of friends were the opposite. We wanted to be different than that. We didn't like the idea of looking like everyone else. So I wouldn't necessarily find a particular performer, like I didn't see a picture of Boy George and think, I want to look like that. No, I would just look at the different bands with their big hairdos, made-up faces, and strange looks, and I would kind of develop my own, using them as a reference, not like a copycat. There were people like this all over the city. There'd be events that involved other schools, and I'd find other people. There were meeting places, like there was this underage nightclub I used to go to, and loved it. There were all these kids there from all over. It would be interesting because I'd go to shopping malls also and would know like so-and-so worked in this store and so-and-so worked in that store. It would be a pleasurable experience to visit the mall because I could just simply see all these different people, which were different from the typical ones in my hometown, even though we're all the same city. It's just spread out. In these nightclubs, there'd be kids from all over in the same spot. So I'd recognize certain ones, and there'd be cliques, of course, ones that hated each other because they didn't like the way they looked, and other shallow, superficial things. But we were kids. I was 16, and nightclubs, they served soft drinks for us. I would drink Dr. Pepper all evening, and they had a huge dance floor that was lit up like Saturday Night Fever, and it had lights that went on and off. But that's the kind of thing I like to do, is go to those events. Throughout my childhood, we did have a therapist. It was a psychologist that worked in the same hospital my father worked in, which I don't know if this is true, but supposedly if you're a doctor in a building and there's another doctor you get services from, they don't charge. I would go to this therapist every so often because there were some issues in the home where there's sibling rivalry and situations like that I would see periodically. Every few months would just visit this doctor and sit there. I don't think it ever did anything because nothing was ever solved or resolved. It was more like a situation where I would just sit there and tell it like it is, and parents probably use that to find out information. I was going to this psychologist. At one point, he had asked something like, how bad are things at home? And they really weren't bad at all, with the exception of a rivalry with a sister who thought she knew it all. And that did result in me trying to get her, because I was the younger one, and she thought she knew it all, and I'd undermine her sometimes. It wasn't that bad, though. But I did, and the office said, oh, it's terrible. When he said, how bad are things at home? It's terrible. terrible. And he kind of left it at that. Then a few weeks later, my mother had announced that she was taking me to see the psychologist. And she said, oh, he's moved to a different hospital, which I believed. Now, of course, I was a music lover. Whenever she'd take me somewhere in the car, I would always grab a cassette, which is outdated today. But I remember exactly what it was. It was the B-52s, Bouncing Off the Satellites, the last album with Ricky Wilson before he died. And I remember the song playing, She Breaks for Rainbows. As we got into the parking lot, we went in. I wasn't too bright at the time because we went into this almost empty office building. There was one receptionist, and I was sitting there out in the waiting room because the doctor had said,
why don't you stay out here? I'm going to talk to your mother first, and then we'll talk to you.
So I sat there. After a while, I got bored and noticed that there was no receptionist around, and I wondered, what are they talking about in there? So I went up and I put my ear to the door and I listened. I heard things like this.
I don't want him having any phone calls.
And I was thinking, what is she talking about? And then I heard,
we don't know if he's gay or if he's on drugs or this or that.
And again, I was just listening thinking, what is going on? Eventually, she came out. He told me to come in. And I sat there and spoke with him for a few minutes. And it was just a normal, regular visit, discussing what I feel about this and that. And then afterwards, he had said,
I'm going to take you for a tour around our new hospital.
Which I thought was strange. I still had no idea what was going on. And I said, okay. So we walked around this building, and he took me down this hallway, and the whole place was pretty empty. However, we went down these steps into this area, and I saw a bunch of adolescents, teens and below. I was just thinking, what is this? And then he had said to some of the kids in one of the rooms,
hey, could you clear this room out for us?
They did, and the door shut, and he said,
TJ, I know this is a trick, but we want you to be a part of this program.
And I immediately felt a sinking feeling because I was just talking to this girl about plans for the weekend, going to some new nightclub, and I told her, oh, I'm going to a different office to see my therapist, and she had said later,
I knew when you said that something was wrong.
I was a 16-year-old kid in high school, hadn't murdered anyone, hadn't done anything horrible, was completely shocked, and now this man was saying they wanted me part of this program, and I felt like I was in some kind of sick movie, and I was like, no, I'm not staying here. And they're like,
yes, you are.
It ended up being like incarceration almost. They had a 3-day or 72-hour observation period where you're forced to be in this area of the building, which was the sectioned off part for adolescents only. And then after the 3 days, you're allowed to go to the lunchroom and to the gym or wherever else. They'd bring the food in and shove it through the door. It was on a tray. It was yucky. And here I was just stripped and plucked out of my environment, thrown into this thing, and it was just horrific. And I was lost thinking, why am I here? I didn't understand. Again, nothing happened. It wasn't like I robbed a bank and got caught and then was put here. It was nothing. My guess is that because I was a client of this doctor and this doctor was spearheading this new hospital, he wanted to get some business for it, so probably told my parents, oh, maybe your son would do good in there. But they never really said why it was done, and it never really cured or solved anything, but it did disrupt life. And it did show me various instances of what could be considered psychopathic or narcissistic behaviors among staff and other inmates. But I plan on revealing a few stories as far as what happened in this circumstance, if you're interested in hearing further. My first night, I was brought into a room, and there was another boy in there, and I looked at him and didn't recognize him. He was pretty friendly. He understood that I was distressed because I was like, I can't believe I'm even here. How did this happen? And he was even plotting things like,
well, there is a fire alarm. I could pull it for you if you want to run out the back door when we do this or do that.
I was thinking, well, where am I going to go? Run home? I didn't have any other place to go. I was a 16-year-old kid. I was enrolled in high school and taking a class such as a photography class where you have to be there and take the photos, and I had a partner who was a friend of mine. It was all just crashing down because I thought there's no way this can happen. I am in school. I can't just be out of school. There's no reason to be. It turned out they had what they called a homebound teacher, which is usually for pregnant girls. I had no baby, but it was just very shocking at the time. And the boy was from a different school, and it turned out when I spoke with him, he happened to know some of the people I knew from that area, which was a nice relief to feel some kind of connection with the outside world with a stranger. With the homebound teacher, they would send some other teacher to me with my assignments I had to do, but I couldn't take the photography class. I had to drop out of that, but I had the paperwork to do the other and my books and everything, but I had no clothing. They said something like,
your parents will bring your clothing in a few days.
They eventually did. One of the things they brought was a t-shirt of the Cult, which I thought was funny. When the counselor lady walked in the room, she saw that shirt and said,
oh, that shirt's not appropriate. You can't wear that.
And I said, why not? What's wrong with it?
Look at it. It's not appropriate.
Here, my parents brought me clothing that was not appropriate, which I thought was funny. We'll discuss that later if you want. That was my beginning, seeing this kid in there who knew someone I knew, feeling completely lost, not even believing it's possible because the school and everything, I figured I can't just come out of school, and then I learned the way they deal with that. More to come. Hero's here. He's visiting.
Hi, I am the beautiful, lovely Narcopath that haunts you in your dreams. And I know it. I see to it.
I'm forced to give more confessions, so I might as well clue you in on something that you didn't pick up on until much too late. You know, I told you that I always have to be the center of attention. That bothered you. It made you think that, sure, I might be in your center of attention for the time being, but that's only gonna last so long.
It won't be long until I want someone else to give me that attention.
If you're there with me forever like I told you I wanted to marry you after the first week, you thought that would pose problem. You kept asking, how could I, being the type of person who has to be the center of attention, used to getting my way and everyone I want in the bedroom, and their mother and father, you wondered how I could adapt to married life with you. Well, honey, I didn't think about any of that stuff because I've got that covered. There are plenty of things you won't do in that bedroom that I have several other people to do for me. I simply said,
I don't know what you're talking about. If I'm married to you, then I wouldn't need to be the center of attention anymore.
and you weren't buying it. I don't understand why. You should have just believed me. But of course, your prediction came true, and you found out about it after I discarded you because you knew too much about me. You found out that I'd gone to a party the very next night and blew one of your good friends and his brother. I used to tell you I would never do such a thing, and now you know what I do. I'm not as pure as I pretended to be. It all stems from the fact that I have to be the center of attention no matter where I go. One time we were at the mall together, and these guys were staring at me, so I steered you over to the sporting goods store, because I knew you'd be interested in all the products. I told you to look for a specific one that I knew they wouldn't have, and I knew you wouldn't ask because you're a man. Men don't ever ask clerks for help. That gave me time. I said,
Oh, I've got to go to the restroom. I'll be right back.
then I went down the hall with my high heels clicking and my skirt. I pulled it up just a little bit higher so they could see. And then I dropped an ink pen that I took from the clerk's desk when they weren't looking. It allowed me to bend over.
What the are you doing? Nobody wants to see that, Phil.
Fine.
You're nasty.
I'll save that for Playboy.
Yeah, right.
I wanted to pose nude. You're lost. I'm not going to show it to you ever
It's
again.
nothing the whole world hasn't seen already.
He's kidding. But yes, I had to be the center of attention. And I had those guys licking my thighs. You came out a few minutes later and saw them. It was not really right of you to attack them. I did entice them. They were just going after what was sexy. I told you they raped me and attacked me.
Get them, get them.
It's a good thing I got most of the phone numbers. And if you have contacted me on social media since, I've got my black book built. I've got a black book better than Jeffrey Epstein's. You better believe it. That allows me to be the center of attention several times a day with several different people. That's just the way it is if you're the Narcopath. But we can't tell that to our potential mates because they could never live with it. And I'm too selfish to allow that to give it away just because they don't want to have to live with that. So I just pretend like I'm not like that.
Oh, I'm only like that when I'm a single person. When I'm with you, and you.
Well, the next one better not see through it. It appears that a bunch of you people out there are going on video sharing platforms and you're watching tutorials about narcissistic people, and it's getting harder for me to find a date. God damn it, you TJ, would you knock it off and cancel this channel so I can have a social life
No
again?
way.
People are catching on to my tricks. Some of them are even finishing my sentence before I do when I'm about to lie, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? This is an epidemic. I need my supply, and you are creating a scarcity. I will get you.
Whatever you say, I think it's time to go back to your cage.
I'm a prisoner. Please, SOS, send help. TJ's irrational. Turn that camera off. Turn it off. I'm sick of this. We need to have a discussion. How dare you?
How dare you?
How dare you? How dare you?
How dare you?
I've got a secret. Machine on my behind. Secret, I've got a secret. With hearts in your pie. Secret, I've got a secret. I am immortal mind. I've got a secret I've been hiding under my skin. My heart is human, my blood is boiling, my brain I am. So if you see me acting strangely, don't be surprised. I'm just a man who needed someone, and someone to hide, to keep me alive. To keep me alive. Somewhere to hide, to keep me alive. I'm not a robot without emotion. I'm not what you see. I've come to help you with your problems so we can be free. I'm not a hero, I'm not a savior. Forget what you know. I'm just a man whose circumstances beyond his control, beyond my control, beyond his control. I need control. Beyond his control. I am immortal. Secret, secret, I've got a secret. Who hides behind a mask? Secret, secret, I've got a secret. So no one else can see. Secret, secret, I've got a secret. My true identity. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Domo, domo, domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Domo, domo, domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto.